Hi everyone, it's Jen again. This week I have been working on basically bringing over all of the systems from Arcane Dice Wars to Villain's Heart in order to kind of make a final edit version of that game. Been working on some new sprites for the close-up portraits to better match the new Bond sprites as well. This is the danger of, for me, of having a game that has spanned over like 2 years, is that as I keep drawing and I just kind of follow my whims, I guess, my style, my approach can start to change a little bit, and so then I want to keep on going back and revising the art, even though I don't even know that I would say it's like better. I'm just trying to create a little bit more consistency with the skill trigger art and I guess everything but the card art. I've just kind of given up, like trying to make it look in line with that, and redoing the card arts is just, I guess, up too monumental a task that I don't feel like tackling right now. So I'm gonna let those just fly and make peace with it. Sometimes game development is about compromise. There are certain things that I don't want to compromise on, especially when it comes to story and character development, and other things like art. Some of the more, I guess, what I would consider superficial flourishes, I'm more willing to just say, well, I'm a solo dev, this is a hobby project, so it is just gonna be what it's gonna be. And I don't feel like that necessarily takes away from my integrity as a creator to make those compromises. Even with like the skill trigger animations, I could say, well, the animation is kind of choppy. I should probably double the frame rate, but instead I'm like, well, you get the idea of what's supposed to be happening here. It's 2 seconds of the player's time, and maybe it's not perfect, but the amount of extra effort it would take to polish those and to double the frame rates, which, by the way, Renpai would start to struggle with, because even trying to cram an extra like 5 frames in those clips was causing it to skip frames anyways, so like the extra drawings are kind of going to waste. I digress. Anyways, there is always a bit of like push and pull with like compromise, so I wouldn't say that going into doing these revisions is going to be a perfect or what I would want to implement everything. But I do want to give it a little bit more, especially when it's coming from the story aspect. I wanted to take the opportunity of exploring these characters to flesh out some things, especially Michaelis. Poor Michaelis. In hindsight, I think there are a lot of aspects of his character, because he's a very guarded, no pun intended, he's a very guarded personality. I would say even at Max Bond, he still hasn't really shown all of his vulnerabilities, because of so much of his like self-identity is wrapped around like how he wants other people to perceive him to be. So he's very much of a control freak in that way, to the point where he still hasn't really let the player completely see through his facade, which is kind of funny, I think, in some ways, because he often, or at least on some occasions, has mentioned how Jeth is two-faced, and I think Michaelis is also very two-faced. I would say all the villains are or villain-type characters are pretty two-faced, but not in, I guess, as a conscientious way as Jeth, who's very self-aware that he is being two-faced. He's being very deliberate in his presentation and his like thoughts to be manipulative. I think that Michaelis is more like, I guess, delusional, and that he really has bought into his own like outward persona that he presents himself as, and in fact whenever he is challenged that maybe there's more to you than what you you show on the surface, he denies it vehemently. And it's not because he's trying to manipulate people, it's because that is how he's made peace with himself and the world, and to acknowledge that that he's not okay or he's not exactly everything he portrays himself as, would be an admission that almost like everything in his worldview is flawed, and it would just kind of break his psyche and cause him to have like a complete meltdown and have to reevaluate everything about how he sees the world and sees himself. So instead, when he has like these very conflicting and strong emotions that don't align with his, I guess, pristine outer shell that he presents himself as, he just kind of pretends that didn't happen. He doesn't acknowledge it, and then he just tries harder to suppress any of those like kind of like feelings of like anger or resentment or fear, because it doesn't align with his like stoic and controlled and guarded, exterior. But I digress, because what I really wanted to talk about this week, because I am having that time of the month and I didn't make my weekly goals. I like to talk about these times where I quote unquote stumble and fall, because I feel like it's a natural part of like these very long involved like processes, and so much emphasis is placed on like, okay, well, you need to be dedicated, you need to be consistent, and those are all true. But I think the thing that we don't talk about enough is like, it's inevitable that your consistency is going to waver. Like, you are a person that has, other things going on in their life, and in the case of like my monthly cycles, this is just a biological reality that like I cannot really materially change in any way. Like, even if I got a better paying job or a sponsor that made it so that I didn't have to go to work on my full-time job, or like my child grew up and didn't need as much care, or whatever it was, I could get rid of all the other factors in my life, and my body would still protest against being as productive as I'm used to being during this particular time of my biological cycle. And you would think that after living with myself and these cycles for, decades, that I would be able to sit back and be like, okay, this is what it's like. I am going to have headaches. I am going to have pain. I'm going to have fatigue. I'm going to have these very low moods that will also cause me to doubt myself and to feel existential dread, and all these things, will become catastrophic in my mind, because my mood and my brain chemistry is all going to be off, and I'm going to be second guessing myself. I'm going to be feeling insecure about my projects, my stories, my goals. I'm going to be questioning everything. And you would think that going through this every month, that I would schedule myself for that, or I would be, I would acknowledge it and be like, okay, this month or this week, I'm going to like not set the goals to be the same as they were like the week before and the week before, because it's not going to be possible for me to keep up with the same pace. But for whatever reason, probably because I'm conditioned, because work doesn't stop, caretaking doesn't stop, all of the other responsibilities I have don't slow down and they don't stop. So naturally I apply that mode of reasoning and scheduling to my game development, even though it is just my hobby and passion projects. So when I inevitably fail in the past, especially when it was like paid work and stuff, when I inevitably fail to keep up the same pace like I'm some kind of automaton. I'm just a robot that just, you know, you turn on and it just functions and it outputs at a consistent rate. When I inevitably fall short, in the past, it would, because my mood is already low, it would cause me to keep going down this like downward spiral. Either that or I would just like power through, and I would force myself to go through that tiring feeling of weariness, to fight through, to like ignore my body telling me that you need rest and you need, this is a time where you cannot, you know, you shouldn't be trying to force yourself over the finish line. Instead of doing that, I would push now that I think about it, I would mostly push myself to keep meeting the goals. And then that would just cause me to be tired indefinitely, because I would be pushed beyond my limit, and then I would be tired in the following weeks and the following months and the following year until I eventually made my deadline. And I just would burn out after that, and I would just like be in this low state of depression for like, I don't know, months, where I wouldn't be doing anything because I was completely burnt out. So you can go that way, or you can just like kind of stop what you're doing and then like berate yourself because you failed. Why would I do this to myself? Why didn't I ever account into these like, I don't know, objective, you know, physical realities? Why did my brain like fight against this so much? It's because I really do feel like we are socially conditioned to not acknowledge, you know, these just material reality that will interfere with our productivity and our ability to be consistent like a machine on our output. So this week, making a short story long, I fell short of my goals. I still was working on the intimacy sprites, and I thought that I was making my goal like pretty low, but I still fell short. What am I doing about it? Nothing. I'm reminding myself of why. Oh yes, of course, it's because this happens every month. Duh. And I am also reminding myself that, okay, well, you give yourself proper time to rest and you don't push yourself to meet this deadline. You know what always happens when you have a low, at least for me. If I give myself that room to just not be at top performance and to just, I guess what I would call, just get by, just do what I feel like is the bare minimum. When I get out on the other end, I always have a burst of productivity, creativity, focus, where I then have like, maybe it's in relation, maybe it's just my imagination, because my mood does also kind of like go back up from that low dip. But it feels like to me that if I give myself permission to just not be as overperforming as I normally would be, that the follow-up is that I have at least 1 or 2 weeks of like really high performance, where I will like exceed my goals and surpass it. And I feel like I knock everything out of the park. And as somebody who would rather have the consistency of just like a flat line, smooth ride, and I do everything else in my life to try to give myself that. But this is the one area in my life that I cannot. And I've tried all kinds of different things to try to fight against it. If I just embrace this reality that this is how I'm gonna be, it evens out. And so I guess that's the other thing that I want to take away, whether you're female, biological female or not, is that if you trust yourself, your vision, your whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, things have a way of also evening out. That the more you pull away from I guess when you look at the scope, yeah, maybe you had this up and down, and maybe it feels like at the time, because your mood is low, that you're having more downs than ups. If you just kind of do what you can, and you trust yourself, and you trust what you want to do to get to it when you are in a better place, and you give yourself permission to rest or to work at a slower pace. I don't like to stop completely. Then in hindsight, I look very consistent. Over the course of like years, like the last 4 years, even when I thought I was taking a pretty long break, I look pretty darn consistent as far as my output goes. So, yeah. Maybe that's just something I personally struggle with, and I don't know if you'll be able to relate to me or not. But I just thought I'd share that and put that out there, because that is just something that, even being alive as long as I've been alive and dealing with this body of mine as long as I've been dealing with it, I have only just really recently discovered. Okay, let's have a good week going forward, and as always, don't forget to enjoy the process and take care. Bye bye.